The WBC belt that has included Ali, the greatest of all time. They are set and ready to answer who's the greatest of right now. Wilder, Fury 2, here we go.
News. That's what they tried to do in front of the world, and with his white privilege, he was able to surpass a lot of different things. You know, many people, especially in boxing, they did this, would allow them to do this.
Right.
I see no evil, I hear none, so I shall speak none.
Right.
When they know, no matter what has been said, you know.
There is Deontay Wilder attempting to manipulate the narrative and structure it so that he can be some kind of a victim, some kind of a civil rights hero, if you will. This isn't the first time we've seen this. This isn't the first time we've
Heard this.
Witnessed Deontay Wilder attempt to make this engagement into something that it isn't. Make it about something that it's not about. I want you guys to understand something. This is a boxing channel where we cover boxing news. Thus, the extent of what we're about to cover really is limited to boxing, and it really is limited to Deontay Wilder, his candor, and how that lines up or doesn't line up with
reality,
the facts of the matter. The fact of the matter is, Deontay Wilder is citing privilege,
citing Tyson Fury as the beneficiary of that privilege.
And the fact of the matter is that if Tyson Fury was afforded a shot at the WBC title, if he was afforded that privilege, he wasn't afforded that privilege by some invisible enemy, some
faceless,
nameless entity somewhere high up in a high-rise, high seat of power. He wasn't afforded that world title opportunity by some clandestine organization or some clandestine entity. He was afforded that world title shot, that opportunity, because of Deontay Wilder. Let me make this even easier for you guys to understand, as I know that many of you are not as intelligent as I am.
It's okay.
A lot of you guys are pretty fucking stupid. Let me make this simple. You can't cry about privilege when you're the one who afforded Tyson Fury that privilege. He didn't get a shot at that title for no reason. He got a shot at that title because you wanted to give him one.
You didn't want to give Dillian Whyte one.
How long was he chasing you down? How long was he calling your name?
How long?
At the time that Deontay Wilder and his team made the decision to afford Tyson Fury that opportunity, who was the higher-ranked contender by way of the WBC? Tyson Fury or Dillian Whyte?
It was Dillian Whyte.
I mean, if you're all for your people, the way you say you're all for your people, then shouldn't you have afforded Dillian Whyte that opportunity ahead of Tyson Fury? If we're gonna follow along with this narrative that Deontay Wilder, Malik Scotch, and many of Wilder's supporters like to purvey, if we're supposed to play along with this narrative, then wouldn't it have made more sense to afford Dillian Whyte that opportunity as opposed to Tyson Fury, the white man?
If Tyson Fury got that privilege, it's because you gave it to him.
Whether you think this entire trilogy is scripted or not, that is the story. Tyson Fury was only afforded that world title opportunity not because he got himself in position as a mandatory challenger, not because he fought his way up the ranks and earned the shot. He was afforded that opportunity because Wilder wanted to give it to him. So you can turn around in 2021 and talk about privilege. Whatever privilege he has is a privilege you gave him, not somebody else. You were the WBC champion. You chose to fight Tyson Fury instead of Dillian Whyte. You chose to fight Tyson Fury instead of unifying titles with Anthony Joshua. You did all of that. That whether this story between Wilder and Tyson Fury is scripted or not, whether these two guys are in cahoots with each other or they're not in cahoots with each other, the same applies. Tyson Fury only got injected in today's heavyweight division because you allowed it. You afforded him a world title opportunity where he really didn't deserve one. Most people, myself
I
included,
thought it was a cherry pick.
interpreted that as a sophisticated cherry pick that Tyson Fury was undefeated at the time. He was considered to be this division's lineal champion in some circles, and you quite opportunistically afforded him that opportunity instead of someone who might have been more capable at that time. I still haven't abandoned the idea that the outcomes of these matches between Wilder and Tyson Fury are preordained. A part of me still feels that all of this is scripted, but whether it's scripted or not, the story don't change. Tyson Fury only got a shot at the WBC title because you gave him one.
He was on the rebound.
Rebounding off obesity, rebounding off substance abuse, rebounding off of mental illness. I mean, that's the story we were fed, wasn't it? That Tyson Fury was on the comeback trail, rebounding off several issues he was having and battling his demons. He fights Effer Safari, he fights Francisco Pianetta. None of those fights were WBC eliminators, you understand. At least not final eliminators that would have made him the mandatory challenger to Wilder's belt. Not a single one of those fights. Those are the two fights Tyson Fury had leading up to the first Wilder fight. Deontay Wilder chose to fight Tyson Fury instead of Dillian Whyte. He chose to fight Tyson Fury instead of Anthony Joshua. I mean, if you're supposed to be the civil rights leader,
right,
what are you doing affording Tyson Fury opportunities that you should be affording your brothers?
Yeah, brother.
So let me make this abundantly clear. In spite of what revisions Deontay Wilder and Malik Scotch want to make to the story, the reality of it is Tyson Fury only got a title shot because Wilder gave him one. Not because of this or that, not because of privileges of any kind based on race, creed, or origin. It's based on Wilder giving him the shot. He wanted to give Tyson Fury a shot.
More than he wanted to give anybody else a shot.
And he wants to play the victim now. He wants to play the victim while simultaneously playing the hero, the civil rights hero, as it were.
Crock of shit.
As he is supposed to be the voice of the oppressed when he's been the one doing the oppressing. He oppressed Dillian Whyte of a title shot that he should have got a long fucking time ago that he may never get. Imagine thinking of Deontay Wilder as a hero. Imagine that. Civil rights hero. You afforded Tyson Fury a shot instead of Dillian Whyte. When the second fight took place and all of that happened, you fired Mark Breland.
Brother.
Not even JD's, who was actually there watching them wrap Tyson Fury's hands. The one who was in charge of inspecting and overseeing that entire situation. You fired Mark Breland, not JD's. You gave Tyson Fury a shot, not Dillian Whyte. I mean, what kind of civil rights hero is this?
Seems like he's more likely to do a white guy a favor than a black one.
I'm just giving it to you straight. It's the only way I know how to give it to you. Wilder's actions, as they were, are not in keeping with his candor, this image he's trying to convey, that he's somehow this voice of the people, this monumental man.
Right.
He's a walking, talking contradiction. Whether all of this is scripted or not, based on the story, he's still a walking, talking contradiction.
Where was he during the George Floyd riots?
If he's supposed to be some kind of civil rights leader, the way some people think he's a civil rights leader, where was he during the civil unrest in reference to the George Floyd case? Where was he during all of that, the George Floyd riots? Why didn't he attend any functions? Why didn't he attend any rallies? We don't see any images of Deontay Wilder at all during that time outside of that lone video he uploaded where he was reading a poem that either he wrote or was written for him. We saw Anthony Joshua at a rally. We saw John Bones Jones get involved. We saw several other players from other sports play their part, but we didn't see Wilder. So what's supposed to make this guy a civil rights leader?
You tell me.
What? That based on your script or based on what happened, you got your fucking ass beat, now you feel raw about it? Well, you never should have gave him a title shot in the first place because he didn't deserve one.
You big dummy.
And these are either unresolved plot holes in this scripted melodrama, this scripted trilogy between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. These are either plot holes in that scripted trilogy or the delusions of a broken man. That whether you think all of this is scripted or not scripted, the same applies.
This is probably the biggest goof in postmodern boxing.
This guy goes out of his way to inject tribalism into this endeavor, tribalism into this engagement. He goes as far as saying he's going to make history on Black History Month. Here in America, Black History Month, the month that the rematch took place, and what happens, he gets beat up in front of everybody, from the opening bell to the time the towel was thrown and Kenny Bayless waved it off or whatever the fuck happened. I really don't care. You go as far as making this entire endeavor, this entire engagement, you go as far as trying to make it about something that it's not, so that it could blow up in your face. And at this point in the juncture, we're supposed to feel sorry for you when we the people, we the boxing community, we're telling you, hey, you need to fight Dillian Whyte. Forget about Tyson Fury. He doesn't deserve the title shot. Dillian Whyte does. And if you don't want to fight Dillian Whyte, okay, well, what about fighting Anthony Joshua? That's what we the people, we the boxing community, we're saying. So even if I believe this story, even if I don't believe that all of this is scripted and that's just the way that it happened, the same applies. Whatever happened, happened as a result of your own decisions. All of this is your fault. You're not a victim, and you're not a civil rights leader. You're a charlatan. A phony, a fake, a fraud, misappropriating real-life issues that hit close to home for a lot of people. Misappropriating real-life issues that need real solutions for personal gain. That's what's happening here, and that's why there is an effort being put forth to turn this Wilder versus Fury fight into something that it's not. These issues we're talking about, they hit close to home for a lot of people. They're a grim reality that many Americans here in America have to deal with, and it's a struggle. Make no mistake, it is.
And it's real.
Because these issues may cause individuals to become emotional, perhaps even belligerent, Wilder hopes to capitalize on that.
Fool people.
Hopes to appeal to those sentiments with this situation that has nothing to do with that stuff. At most, what you gotta say is you gave a guy a title shot, and it backfired. You gave him a title shot when he didn't deserve one, and he ended up beating you up, and that's what happened.
That's it.
You believe this story. If you're like me, and you don't believe this story, and you think the whole goddamn thing is scripted, the same applies. If Wilder's the protagonist in this story, I hate to break the news to you, but I don't feel sorry for him, because he's a jackass.
The nerve it takes to say that this guy's anything like Muhammad Ali.
I mean, never mind the boxing. It's clear that, as far as boxing goes, Deontay Wilder ain't got a goddamn fucking thing in common with Muhammad Ali. I mean, we really don't even have to get into that. That goes without saying, and that's a very well-known fact amongst boxing fans. But even as far as the humanitarian effort and the philanthropic work,
That stuff.
do you think that Muhammad Ali would have been held up in some fucking compound while the George Floyd riots were happening and that civil unrest? You think he would have been tucked away in some corner of the world while all of that was going on?
Licking his wounds like Deontay Wilder was.
I'll tell you what's going on here. What these guys hope to do is to touch on issues that many people are familiar with, issues that hit close to home, to render individuals in an emotional state where they won't use their common sense because they're emotional, perhaps even belligerent. He hopes to appeal to that belligerence and use it as an angle to profiteer off of this trilogy, off this third fight. They're using tribalism as a marketing angle to sell you a rerun, a three-peat. That's what this is.
And are you gonna let him?
I told you this before. The first fight was scored a draw, and the second fight was supposed to settle it. Yet for some reason, Tyson Fury walked into a two-fight engagement the second time out, after the contract was amended to now include Top Rank, since the first time out, Tyson Fury wasn't in bed with them. They walk into the situation for the second fight, and a two-way rematch clause is incorporated. But if the second fight is supposed to settle it, if the second fight is supposed to be a tiebreaker, why have you signed on for what in all likelihood will be a third fight? You've signed on for a trilogy. You guys never asked yourself about that?
Think about it.
You never wondered why they did that?
Why would they have done that?
If you feel you got robbed in the first fight, and you enter into a amended contract for the second one, why would you agree to a two-way rematch clause? That's saying that if you beat this guy, you're still on the hook, and you agreed to that.
That didn't strike any of you as being odd?
I still believe that everything we're hearing and everything we're seeing could very well be a ploy to approach a third fight from a new angle that allows them to help sell a three-peat.
Because how the fuck else were they gonna do it?
Deontay Wilder wants the boxing community at large to believe that he was the victim of a crime, the victim of some kind of an injustice. An injustice that has neither been substantiated or proven by Deontay Wilder or any of his supporters. This medical evidence by way of the autopsy that proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that Deontay Wilder was struck with a blunt force object, that he was poisoned, that there must have been some kind of collusion between his cornerman, Mark Breland, the crab in the bucket referee, Kenny Bayless.
Him too.
None of this is substantiated. The most I can see is you're giving Tyson Fury a third opportunity to cheat you because you believe he cheated you the first 2 times.
That's it.
None of which makes the least bit of sense if you have a very capable legal team, which is a part of the reason that I think there's more going on here than meets the eye. I think there was always going to be a third fight. I think the pandemic kind of messed things up for him because it was their intention to wrap up this trilogy last year. They couldn't do that because the live gates evaporated. They went away, and what they were waiting for was for the live gates to come back.
They weren't going to leave all that money on the table.
Listen, according to Bruce Trempler, they lost money on the second fight. They lost money on the event in spite of the event having sold more pay-per-views and having sold more tickets than the first fight did. The second fight generated more money than the first one did, but the second fight failed to break even. And with that having happened, they weren't about to leave all that potential live gate revenue on the table, staging the fight behind closed doors. They could have.
They wanted to.
But this is about money. If it weren't about money and it were just about Wilder wanting revenge, they could have had the third fight in a studio setting.
They wanted to.
But this is about money, and they were waiting for the live gates to come back. And as soon as they did, here we are. The second fight didn't break even because it costed more money to put together than the first fight did. The second fight generated more money than the first fight did, but the second fight took more money to make than the first fight did. Thus, the second fight did not break even. And with that having happened, you think they're going to leave $16 million on the table? Of course not. What that communicates to me is that this isn't about revenge. We're not here because of some moral code. It didn't take this long for the third fight to come about because of some morality or anything of the sort.
They were just waiting for the live gates to come back.
And in the mean in between time, they found a way to pull a fast one on Anthony Joshua, on Eddie Hearn, in an effort to discredit them, make them look bad in the mean in between time.
You're an absolute clown if you can't see that the whole thing stinks. A clown. But you know, in the only bit of defence for them, people say, oh, it's ridiculous. They sign the contract so quickly. A lot of the terms are already dealt with in the previous contract. So it is, but again, I'm not so bothered about how quickly it was signed. Just everything was so smooth. Yeah, let's announce on air, sign a contract, great, you sign the contract. If I'm Fury, I'm going, hang on a minute, what the fuck has gone on here? You told me this fight was being made. I'm making an absolute fortune. You guys are now putting me in a fight that but it wasn't. It was like, yeah, no problem. Okay, sign here, sign there. I mean, getting these people to agree to anything took months and months and months. Yet they're willing to move forward on a fight, which I'm sure many terms were pre-agreed, but just happily, arm in arm together. Stinks. The whole thing stinks. So we can't do anything about that. We have to move forward with AJ's career and make the right moves for him.
The guy gets costed a minimum of $75 million, and what's he do? He cheesecake, do cannonballs in the pool, and he seems quite content, quite jovial, quite happy. None of that strikes you guys as odd. Would you be that happy if somebody costed you $75 million?
It's actually more than that. He would have made more than that.
Open your fucking eyes. Can't you see?